And so I'd look at the envelope that was stapled, because they keep the envelope stapled to the back of the return. So then I'd look at the other tax return, same handwriting, 25 in a row.
Wow.
And they're going into nursing homes to get all the socials and the names and addresses of all these people that are sick in a nursing home that don't have a tax filing requirement.
On the street, it's called the drop. You file someone's taxes before they can file their taxes, or you simply get someone's information. You get their social security number and their name, and then you go and you put in, you say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I made $45,000 and I paid in 12. I'm owed $7,000. Can you please deposit it onto this card?
Yes.
And I am, although I just based on reading cases and speaking with these guys, I mean, I know that, I understand that they have to give them the money, they file, they're trying to throw up all of these ways to slow this down and stop it. They're giving people PIN numbers, they're having them call.
Yes.
There's all these things.
Yes.
What kills me is that the IRS doesn't know that Walmart didn't send in the $11,000 or $12,000 that you're saying they paid, that you've paid in. Like the IRS doesn't. I understand they don't have a little account sitting there with your name on it, but like, why don't they?
Well, actually, they do.
You assume that. Well, okay, but so why don't they catch the fact that you're saying I worked for Walmart, I paid in $11,000, you owe me $7,000? Why don't they catch that?
They do. They don't catch it immediately.
Right.
One of the departments I worked in is called automated underreporters.
Okay.
And that department works about 8 to 9 months after the fact, after the tax season closes in April. So along about now, late November, early December, automated underreporters department is starting to fire up 2022, the year we just finished, in addition to all the prior years. Okay. And so they're going to start catching some of these things. They're going to catch this return, this guy from Walmart that said he made 14 grand or whatever he made, and now, we owe him 7. They're going to likely catch that. And there's a cycle that goes on, and they're going to, send out, and he may have gotten the refund, and it's really hard to get money back once the money leaves.
Right. Well, especially if it's not him.
Right. But it went to some place. It went to a bank. It goes to a bank. It doesn't go to, a card per se.
Right. Well, I mean, you could use like a Green Dot card or Rush card.
Yes, Green Dot, yes.
A lot of those they've shut down, but there's so many banks that are allowing you to open bank accounts online, and they get so I understand it goes to
There's a lag. The reason they're not catching it is there's a lag time. There are 300 million people, filing tax returns, and they just simply cannot catch them all right up front.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. And the things you're talking about, I saw those. I would in underreporters, I could see this bank and this account number getting more than one refund.
Right.
But different names and different socials that are stolen or borrowed or made up or whatever. It's so, criminals are smart and they know how to manipulate the system. And the IRS is slow to catch up. CI is super strong, and they really, they've got systems in place. Their technology is just sort of now kind of catching up to modern times.
So one of the guys that I spoke to, it's funny because sometimes you'll talk to some guy who's like what did you do before this? And he'd say, I sold drugs. But he's never had a job. He was a drug dealer for 10 years, and somebody taught him how to do this, and he started doing this. And you're like, and you did this for 5 years? Yeah, he made $1 million doing it. And you're like, that's insane.
Yes.
So, and then you'll talk to someone else who owned a tax was a tax preparer for 15 years, and then he did it. Like him, I can understand getting away with it. But I spoke with a tax preparer one time, and when I was saying, why can't they stop this? And he said, well, you got to look at it like this. He said, at any given time, there's 100,000 corporations in the United States that are behind on their payroll taxes.
Mhm.
He said, so you work at Waterbed Warehouse and they've paid you $60,000 and they've withheld $15,000 from your check, and they were supposed to forward that to the IRS.
Yes.
But they have poor management, they're behind on their bills, and they haven't sent it. Now, when you go to file, you get your W-2, you go to file your taxes. He said, is it fair that the IRS doesn't send you the money because they didn't pay it in? Legally, the IRS, or you have to allow them to withhold the money. He's like, so it's not fair that the IRS says, well, wait a minute, your employer hasn't sent us the money. We're not going to send you the money. He goes, so in their gut reaction is send him the money that he says we owe him. He said, and then we'll figure it out if something's wrong. He said, but initially he said, you need that money. You deserve that money. And whether Waterbed Warehouse ever pays the IRS owes you the money. And I was, I get it, I do, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's still hard. It's unpalatable. So especially seeing these guys they would say, oh yeah, I was, initially these guys would say, look, if I filed 10 of them, 9 of them went through when I first started. And they said it got worse. It's gotten worse over the last 5 or 6 years. And now it's been
worse as in
harder.
Is it better for them or harder for them?
No, much harder. So they're like, now they're filing 10 and they're lucky if 2 or 3 go through.
Yes. The ID theft unit was really starting to gear up about the time I was leaving. My unit, they asked for people in my department to, hey, do you want to go work in this new unit we're forming?
Right.
ID theft, because they become more savvy. And just as your person was saying, yeah, maybe 2 of 10 go through, but they still go through. I talk to people 2 or 3 times a month. Hey, I tried to submit my tax return and the IRS rejected it and they don't know why.
Right.
Figured out. And it turns out to be someone else filed a tax return using a social, either their social or some social that was on the tax return for a kid. So,
yeah, I was going to say, I had one guy who, he actually has an interesting story, but it's funny because he said, he had a car lot, like a buy here, pay here car lot. He's not in a crummy area of town. And he said, these guys would come in and they just had tons of cash. He's like, and he said more and more people were coming in and asking for higher end cars. He said, listen, he said, after 6 months, he said, this one guy who had bought like 3 cars, I said, listen, man, what are you doing? You don't have a job. You're not a normal guy. Is it drug money? Like, what is it? He said, he's like, I really didn't care. He said, I was making a ton of money. I mean, he should care, I know, but he's like, I didn't care. Keep in mind, I met him in prison. So he's like, I really didn't care. But the guy was like, I remember he said to him, he said, is it drugs? He goes, drugs? He goes, nobody sells drugs anymore. He goes, this is the drop. And he goes, what's that? And he goes, it's the tax. And they call it, he goes, we're filing taxes on people that, that are not even, they were doing it on people that didn't even, had never had a job. And so he got that guy to teach him how to do it. He owned a car lot. I think he owned a couple car lots. He started doing it, did it for years. And he said he was much more successful because typically if one of the filings didn't go through, these guys said, oh, okay, it didn't go through. Next. He would call. He said, because they would like mail a letter and say, you need to call here, call this whatever
800 number.
And he goes, I'd call. He said, I'd call, I'd argue with them, I'd answer the questions I could answer. He said, typically I had most of the answers. He said, if you called, he said, honestly, he said, just calling almost got them to release the money. He said, because most of the people just wouldn't call. And he said, if I knew 1 or 2 questions and if 1 or 2 of them, I was like, God, I can't remember. Are you sure that was, I don't think I ever lived there. Are you sure that might have been my mom's address? Because if I just kind of, tried to fumble my way through it, he said a lot of times they would cut him a check, or not a check, but they would wire the money, or just, it's insane.
IRS is, and those are lower level employees. They're not senior executive service. They're not revenue officers and agents that he's talking to. And so they're regular people like you and I, and they don't necessarily have tax law knowledge, like understanding prepare a return and things like that, they're following the Internal Revenue Manual,
Right.
which is a giant if-then chart. If this, then that.
Right.
If the taxpayer says X, Y, or Z, then, okay, release the money and code the account.
Right. And here's the thing, like calling, I can understand that because I actually applied for a bank loan, and they sent me, the documents to sign. And before they would let you sign them, you have to verify your identity.
Right.
They asked me like six questions. What color was your BMW in 2000?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't pass them.
Couldn't verify your ID. Yes.
Some of the questions were 20 years old. Like,
yes.
I don't remember. It could have been dark blue. It could have been black. I don't know. Right. So anyway, I ended up having to go to the bank and sign the papers. So I could understand even if it's really you not getting the answer. So it's tough.
I saw so many schemes cross my desk. I would get these bundles of tax returns, 25 and 50 in a bundle. Go to the cart, get them, take them back to my desk, sit down and start going through them. Because there's some error codes that are coming up on these returns. So I have to clear the code to error to see if it can really muster and go on through the system. And I clear one, okay, that's fine. Get the next tax return. And I'm handling paper documents.
Right.
And I see the next one, oh, same error code. Oh, isn't that interesting? Okay. Clear that one. Third one. Wait, this is the same error code. Let me look at these other two. And so I'd look at the envelope that was stapled, because they keep the envelope stapled to the back of the return. And it's from, Podunk, USA, somewhere in Alabama or something, handwritten to the IRS with a handwritten return address and a postage, that it was hand canceled at a post office. And so then I look at the second tax return, same handwriting,
same envelope,
same handwriting, 25 in a row.
Wow.
And they're going into nursing homes, or they're working with someone inside a nursing home to get all the socials and the names and addresses of all these people that are sick in a nursing home that don't have a tax filing requirement. And they make up a little bit of income, just enough to get maybe $500 or $600 refund, $200 or $300. Chump change, nothing. But you multiply that.
Yeah. You start adding zeros and it becomes a lot of money.
It becomes a lot. And I would see these in bundles of 25. And then I'd be like, okay, wait, I need to stop. This goes to CI. And I would reroute it to criminal investigation.
But you never know what happens. That's horrible.
Never know what happens.
I would have to go find somebody in a week or something. I'd have to go and say, what's going to happen with that? And then I'd check back and no, it's not like that. No, it's not a big building.
And they don't advertise what they're working on for obvious reasons, but they do post when a case has finally come to resolution, it's gone to court, someone's been fined or sent to jail, then they post what they've,
They don't say you found it. They don't give you an attaboy. No attaboy.
No, they're not out for attaboys. So they're like, hey, we caught the bad guy, because ultimately this person is defrauding you and your neighbors.
Right. I mean, no doubt.
At the end of the day.
I'm not saying it's not wrong. Yeah. I'm amazed that someone stumbled across this and then it spread so rapidly.
Yes. Yeah. When ITINs were first initiated, the individual taxpayer identification number, they had a unit in Philadelphia that was running that group, and then they moved it to Austin, and so they had lower level employees looking at the ITIN applications. This is for someone that comes into the U.S., doesn't have a social, but they need some kind of tax ID number. Socials come from Social Security Administration. ITINs are issued by the IRS. So they would send in a W-7, a Form W-7, with lots of documents attached to it, like, proof of citizenship and birth and all sorts of official documents that IRS employees not trained in any kind of forensic analysis of, is this a real birth certificate or is this manufactured? They didn't know. And they were shooting these applications through and giving people ITIN numbers And those I-2 numbers were assigned to people that were being claimed as dependents on tax returns.
Okay.
You start claiming dependents.
Yeah, you're getting
credit. You're getting child tax credit, additional child tax credit. And so they would be getting tens of thousands of dollars in refunds. And my department, we would see this, and there's 100 people working out on the floor. And I'm just seeing in my little shift, how many am I stamping? Okay, this passes. They get it. I'm just one person. This was early on. They've cracked down now, and it's much more, it's tight now.
Do they just get greedy, and next thing you know, they have 8 dependents and 10 dependents, and they're just not.
Yeah, it's just a numbers game.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Numbers game, and it's just really frustrating. And people at the IRS are very frustrated by it. This is when I was there. Because we knew that it might be meeting technical aspects of the law, but this isn't right. These people did not live here,
right?
And, all you had to do was prove that some way they're a citizen of some other country, and and they get an I-10. It was really frustrating.
I wrote a book about a guy. So I've written a bunch of that's kind of how this whole thing ended up.
Yes, yeah, that's what I gathered. Yeah.
So I was writing other inmates, true crime stories, and one of the most fascinating inmates, and I won't bore you with his whole case, but I will explain this to you because you'll understand it. You'll be like, wow, okay, listen to this. This was and this is very odd because it was very interesting because it was something I hadn't really heard before. So he was going into distressed companies, and so your company's either about to claim bankruptcy, and he was, by the way, at this time he was a bankruptcy attorney. Okay. He was a disbarred bankruptcy attorney, to be
okay.
But he had been a bankruptcy attorney. He eventually got disbarred, and now he was more like he was investing capital in companies. And one of his tactics would be to go in, and he would take a portion of his fee would be in stock, stock, and then he'd get so much after the first quarter and this sort of thing. And they'd say, well, we don't have that money. Don't worry. We will have the money. I'm going to take care of this. And of course, the first thing he did was he went and he renegotiated with all of the vendors by saying, I'm going to place the company in bankruptcy. And one of the first things he did was, so if your company has, 400 employees, the first thing he would do is he would make sure he'd take all of your employees and he would have them, their pay would be outsourced to an employee leasing company. Okay. So that now the money goes to this employee leasing company. They do all the pay stubs. They do all the withholding. They can renegotiate workman's comp, health insurance, whatever the case may be. But he owned that company. Mm-hmm. And what he really did was, one of the things he did was he stopped sending the employee withholding taxes to the IRS.
Federal tax deposits, yes.
He did this. Now, I'm not positive. This went on for years and years and years. And he would tell the IRS, he would notify the IRS, we're currently, we're experiencing some issues, some liquidity issues. And he'd send them a letter, and there was a form that you fill out, which you notify them, we've withheld the money, but we're about to go, we were contemplating bankruptcy, and we're in the middle of audits, and we're holding the money. And he notified the IRS. Now, apparently, according to him, if you notify them and withhold the money, you're within your rights. They become a creditor. Mm-hmm. So, but he would do this for months and months, and he would meet with the IRS and he would explain, and they would say, how much do you have? I currently have this much money. We're working on this. We're doing this. We may be going into bankruptcy. And then sometimes he would even negotiate, if he owed them $15 million, he would negotiate with the IRS for a lesser payment and get on a payment program. So he doesn't pay him $15 million. He pays him $5 million, and we're going to pay that over the next 2 years, and we'll be able to start paying again. He did this to the tune of, I don't know how many companies it was. I don't know if it was 10 or 12, but it was $180 million by the time they were done. It was the largest tax, what would they call it? Employment withholding tax scheme they'd ever, that had ever happened. His name was Frank Amadeo. He's from Orlando. Like you can look it up. He is fascinating. Well, what I find most fascinating about the guy is that he's also, he has bipolar condition with features of schizophrenia. So he actually believes that, and only periodically, actually, he'd tell you he always kind of believes it, but he believes that since he was very young, God has been talking to him and telling him he's preordained to be emperor of the world. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but everybody that I interviewed said, oh no, he's been saying it forever. Like, no, and I said, well, he jokes about it. They're like, no, he will joke about it and laugh about it. I'm like, so it's kind of like a tongue in cheek. It's just a joke. And they're like, no, he's serious. He said, but you can joke about it with him. He'll joke about it and kind of laugh it off, but he believes it.
A thread of truth in that. And he thinks, yeah.
And he does, without a doubt. But $180 million. He got 22 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote a book about him called It's Insanity. There's been a documentary about him. He actually plotted a coup to take over the Congo. He actually backed a political candidate in the Congo, and eventually the military came in. They said it was an armed coup. He insisted it wasn't armed. It's a fascinating story, but so I had many, many discussions with him about the withholding taxes. And he was also one of the people that told me, he's like, oh, listen, he's like, there are companies all the time that are months, even years behind on their employees' tax withholding. And I just remember thinking that, that's crazy. But he was, he explained it the same way the other guy. He's like, well, what's the IRS's choice? They're not going to come in and shut the company down. There could be 400 people working there. Like, as long as you're trying to pay and you can pay,
yes,
and you're showing payment, you don't miss any payments. He's like, and look, sometimes they go into bankruptcy. Sometimes they end up a creditor. So isn't that, have you ever heard?
That's a kick. I mean, that's a kick. And I will say this, I've been around some people that have bipolar disorder, and when they're on their manic high, I mean, brilliant.
Oh, he's brilliant. He's brilliant.
Amazing stuff. It's like, wow.
He's absolutely brilliant. I'll tell you something else, which is funny because anybody who watches my channel has heard this. But this always makes people go, wow. So my original sentence was 26 years. Frank Amadeo, I met him in prison. He filed what's called a 2255. It's a habeas. It's a motion in the court. He filed 2 of them for me. Once he got 7 years off my sentence. Once he got 5 years off. He got 12 years off of my 26-year sentence. And had it not been for him, I'd be in prison right now because my out date was 2030. So I although I will say, and I really only. And I don't. He wouldn't even consider it disrespectful because he'll say it. He's crazy. He sounds crazy. He says crazy things periodically, but he's absolutely brilliant.
Doesn't mean you can't be brilliant, right?
But $180 million. He'll also try and tell you that oh, it was perfectly legal. We notified the IRS. We were in negotiations. But you were using that money to plot taking over other countries and buying other companies. And there may have been some discrepancy.
Extenuating circumstances.
You had me until you.
Yeah.
Right.
We tell ourselves stories.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was great. It was that's my IRS story. Hey, if you guys like the interview, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. And also, please check the description box. I'm going to leave the Amazon link for Kristine's book, and leave me a comment, and please consider joining my Patreon. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. See ya.